We're going to start by singing Happy Birthday. Somebody wanted to make sure we all knew. All right. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Looks like we have everyone here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. This is our study session, 5 o'clock study session. I'd like to welcome everyone here. We're going to start by indicating who is here. Connie, why don't you go ahead?
Connie Burgess.
Kim Chandler.
Julie Jackson.
Chris Wynn.
Karen Winder.
Clark Nelson.
Todd Hauber.
Rich Nye.
And Nicole McDermott. All right, thank you. First up on our agenda is we do have some consent items. These were purchases that we have had to be able to look at the last few days. So if there's any questions or concerns, if not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion, questions? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. We are going to go ahead and move on to our study session, the main part of this, which is reviewing our strategic plan. Before we get started, as you guys noticed, hopefully, as you looked through the slides, things are kind of separated into categories. We have the academic priority, we have the social skills and disposition priority, and then we have the talent development priority. It is my suggestion that we take each of those kind of as a section. If you have questions, let's get through the slides just for that section, and then let's take questions from that area. I'm going to go ahead and ask that we each do one question apiece until we all get around to our questions, if we have those. I do want you to know we have talked about this. There is a potential that this may take more than one study session. So if we do not get through everything and we hit a certain time where we're just like, okay, we're done, let's tap out. Let's move on to our executive session, and then let's bring this back next time.
What time would that be?
What time would you like, Clark?
5:15?
Okay, be realistic. So I would say 7 o'clock, if that's okay. That gives us 2 good hours to talk about things. And that hopefully 6:30, 7 o'clock, 6:30, so that we still have time to talk about the stuff for our executive session.
Just 6:30 only because I know we have a long executive session.
Is that, or I know Clark would say okay. How's everybody else feel about 6:30?
Aye.
Okay. All right, we'll aim for 6:30, see about where we are in the discussion, and then if we still have, because I know there are several people who have questions and concerns that they want to bring up, so let's make sure we get those covered, and if we don't get to them this time, for sure next time, okay? All right, we're going to turn the time over to Rick. All right.
All right, thank you, Board President, and thank you, Board. Thank you for the recognition of with the cookies and the balloon. It's been a great day, full of surprises and well wishes, and so anyway, I appreciate being here though with you tonight as well. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. As we launch into the Graduate of Granite discussion, just a little context, a little bit of background. As you recall, in some of this. Is just by way of reminder, as I came to the district and we started identifying what are those strategic priorities, what are the things we're going to focus on, how are we going to align our resources, what measures are we going to look at for improvement. Really went out the first year, this being the second year, right? The first year, identifying what those things are that we are currently doing, or what it is that we have done, what are we currently doing, and what is it that we would like to either continue to do or start doing or stop doing as we move into the future. Now, part of that discussion really is to identify if we were to remove all the many layers that have come into education over the decades, and get down to the fundamental core principle of what is public education, and start there. How would we reimagine it? And as you recall, without going into Educational Foundations 101, but as you recall, the Common School movement of the 1850s, 1860s really was society's way of saying, hey, we need to invest in public education for the promulgation of democracy by having a well-educated citizenry. And so as we think about, well, what does it mean to provide for a well-educated citizenry, that really is the fundamentals. And the things that rise to the top every time when people think about public education is to provide training and education and growth in academics, in English language arts, math, science, the humanities, social studies, the fine arts. These are the core fundamental purposes of education. And then we start looking around, and this is as we've gone through this process, and saying, okay, of all of that, if that is the fundamental core purpose, is to provide for the academic growth and training and well-being of our children, what systems need to exist? So if the academic piece becomes the what, everything else becomes the how. And we've seen over decades and decades and decades of public education reform, the how is being redefined regularly. And sometimes those reforms over the course of the last several decades have layered on top of each other, which is why we see kind of what we see today in public education. So for us, being able to strip away some of that and identify what it is that we would want for our children, we start getting into the how. As far as the strategic plan is concerned, one, it should identify, as it does, what those priorities, those initial overarching priorities are. One, graduation, and two, proficiency. And we created some metrics and measures and priorities associated with that. And so as we think about, well, what does it take to have our students, by the time they graduate, be able to, in their post-secondary passions, pursue whatever it is that they would want for, their parents would want for them and what they would want for themselves, and that we then would create the structures and the systems to have prepared them for that life after high school. And so for us, looking at this, we began to identify, again, the how. How are we going to prepare for a student when they graduate and leave us, that they're prepared? And part of that is proficiency. And so we take a look at systems to be able to support those priorities. And so academics as a priority, social skills and dispositions becomes a priority, talent development becomes a priority. And Rick will elaborate on, and I will elaborate on that just a little bit more. So what is it of all the academic things that we do we prioritize? And so we started prioritizing that. Social skills and dispositions. We live in a society. How do we engage others and develop the skills necessary, the social skills necessary to engage with others? Because certainly we don't live in isolation of the other, but we are all part of a larger community. A community in our home, a community in our neighborhoods, a community within a city, state, nation, and global, so forth. So what is it of those social skills that we would want for our children? And then the talent development, that third priority, really begins to speak to our commitment to our employees. Saying if we are in charge of, or given the responsibility, the stewardship to provide for the academic and social skills and dispositions well-being of our children as we partner with parents to provide that service, how are we then taking care of our employees whose charge it is to do that? And making sure that we're making those appropriate investments. And then we take a look at systems. How are our systems functioning as aligned to that or those priorities? And so that's where the how gets in. A good strategic plan should identify, one, of course, priorities, but two, what are those objectives underneath those priorities? What are the measures that suggest that we're making progress toward our priorities? And what specific action steps will we take as aligned to that? And as you think, as we've identified that, one, what are also measures of implementation fidelity? Meaning if we've identified and prioritized systems, how well do we know whether or not they're being implemented and implemented well? And then we can measure at that point, not to make things so linear or quantitative sounding. There's a qualitative nature to it, of course. But how is it then, are we saying, well, you know what, this action step is really having this effect, and that's the effect we need. Therefore, we can have confidence saying We're allocating resources to something, and that something is having a desired result. Or contrary, we are investing in a strategy, it's being implemented with fidelity, but it's not having the effect that we need it to have. And so that's what you're seeing here in a very draft format. Again, as we've identified that and we've further refined it, we've engaged in some feedback. It's not laminated, meaning it ought to be dynamic. We ought to receive feedback on it, and some of our next steps include how we'll do that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But I just want to emphasize as we're thinking about this conceptually, we then turn to our District Improvement Steering Committee, DISC, and these are educators within our departments who then take a look at our systems, the things that we're doing, and then starting to look at the extant literature. What is peer-reviewed that shows that it actually has been effective? And how might we think about that for us? Versus looking at, well, it's not versus, but also being able to take a look at in the extant literature and the research, the evidence base, what has been working, what hasn't, and then situating our context accordingly. And so while this document still is very much in draft, we feel foundationally that those big pieces are there. Not saying we can't have a discussion around them, not saying that we can't have some debate about it, not saying that we won't go out and solicit feedback, because we will. And we'll continue to refine those processes and procedures. But I at least wanted to establish foundationally that's how we've arrived to something of what you're seeing here before you in this strategic plan. What are those priorities? What are our objectives in those priorities? What are those action steps? And what are some of the measurables to say, you know what, we're able to deliver on? What is the value proposition, a term that I use to describe a strategic plan? What is our value proposition to children and their parents for having sent their children to be under our care to provide those educational services? And so, Rick, from there, we launched into engaging multiple education professionals through DISC and others to kind of guide us through that work. So any questions foundationally of how we arrived here as far as recap and perhaps some of the logic model behind how we engaged in our thinking through that prioritization?
Not that, but I just want to say thank you for this. You've heard teachers say over the years, oh, well, give it 5 years and it will change. So you know that in the past, there have definitely been layers and teachers get very resistant. But to be able to put it on paper, to be able to say these are our expectations type thing, so that we all can be held accountable for it, I just say thank you. It will be a great journey through this.
And I also wanted to thank you for the references. I love, love, love that this is based on research and thinking within the education community. I think that is really important for us to begin there every time. So thank you for that.
Excellent, thank you. And I would just say in regards to that, if the board's interested, we included some of the links to some of the bigger rocks within it or priorities that have research based to it, but we're also happy to provide a more lengthier list, if you will, of references to what you see in there. Thank you. Rick?
Thank you, Superintendent. One of the things that's powerful about being a larger size district is you have some economy of scale where you're able to have some real expertise in certain areas where someone for their job, a superintendent speaks to District Improvement Steering Committee, you're able to have a director over curriculum and instruction, and that's their sole focus, and they're able to really dive in and know the research, know the best practices, and spend that time. Oftentimes in small districts, they're stretched a little bit thin in having to be over several areas and aren't able to get quite the depth that we're able to at our size. The graphic you have in front of you is symbolic of what the superintendent described. I have to apologize, this is a little bit older graphic. I switched it on the Google Slides, but I sent this PDF last week. Our current version has academic proficiency in the center surrounded by the others, and it's a little bit of a visual game that we're playing there, but the idea is just remembering academic proficiency, emphasis in some of our other areas as well. These other areas were refined over time, and we spent 2-3 years narrowing these down. I know board members who were part of District Community Council were involved in District Community Council's feedback around defining these characteristics and deciding, and it kicked off with superintendent early on, having an exercise with parents, just brainstorming what do they want from their students. And that was a powerful exercise because it not only spoke, they said academic proficiency, yes, but they said a lot of other things as well that they'd like their students to receive as part of their education. Soft skills, oftentimes they're called. And so we worked through that, we narrowed it down, we brought it back to District Community Council, we solicited their feedback. On that side, on the interior side, some of our discussion around these was driven by proficiency-based learning. Early on when we started working through a proficiency-based paradigm and really emphasizing proficiency and standards in how we reported how students were doing, a quick thing we realized was in the teacher's practice, this, and no fault of theirs, but this crossing of academic proficiency with responsibility, if you will, and issuing grades or reporting on a student's performance based on a mixture not only of their academic proficiency, but also in how responsible they were. And so we've grappled with and worked with teachers through proficiency-based learning, as you're well aware, but also some of the evolution of these was influenced by teachers wanting a mechanism to be able to work with students, provide feedback to students, and provide feedback to parents around social skills and dispositions or soft skills or abilities that employers want to see, abilities that higher ed want to see in the future, and abilities parents testified by our District Community Council exercises wanted to see. It's exciting to have a strategic plan. Connie and I were talking a little bit before we started. It's exciting to have a plan. It's exciting to have a map. It's exciting to have a structure to go back to stay organized, to be able to communicate, to be able to, like the superintendent said, make our decisions around resources. What's the plan? What's the map? What's the roadmap? And that's an exciting piece for us. Again, like the superintendent said, this is a dynamic, living document, if you will, and that's how we want it. Oftentimes when these are not dynamic, they go on a shelf somewhere and aren't referred to. So we use District Improvement Steering Committee and monthly take a look at our measures to be able to decide, are we on track? Do we need to make adjustments? That exercise, that committee, and that continually referring back to the plan makes it a dynamic plan, but it also makes it very real. So this slide's just speaking to the strategic plan and how we've organized it. I think I have another slide that gets there as well. Our overall arching goals of our strategic plan, and you'd love to have 20 of them, but that's very challenging. Our overall strategic goals are graduation rate and proficiency. You'll remember growth is a big emphasis in Granite, and it is very important, and it's nice in a lot of ways because it can provide very immediate, narrowed down feedback to a teacher. We do incorporate growth, and we have growth as part of our recognition. But for the strategic plan, we're looking at real big, high-level things, graduation rate and proficiency, both in English language arts and in math. This is a way to visualize how it's structured. So on our top level there, we have our overarching goals. We break those goals into 3 priorities, and the superintendent spoke to these: academic, social skills and dispositions, and talent development. I'll plug talent development for a minute here because we know in our business, human capital management is what moves the needle. We know people is what we're about, and people are the ones that increase student learning. Oftentimes, we point to the teacher as the biggest lever for student learning, and that's not to dismiss a lot of the other positions. But if you're not emphasizing and investing in human capital management, you're not going to move the needle. Those 3 priorities are split, and we'll go through those. Underneath each of those, though, they're chunked into objectives. Each priority has 3 objectives, and then under each objective, you have actions. So we know in academics that's a priority. It has 3 objectives, but in those objectives, we have actions that we're going to take to make those objectives happen. I want to highlight as well throughout, we've interlaced measures. And that's can oftentimes be a tricky piece, the measures in our business, just because it's so complex and there's so many variables. And oftentimes there's an argument made against measures because of those variables and because of those complexities. But I believe, and I think most are with me, that that those aren't reasons to not have measures. You still want to measure how it's going. Having it dialed in perfectly can be debatable, but it's not a reason not to have a measure. You see on that bottom line in that bottom square, continuous improvement plans. So how the strategic plan as a district connects out to all of our locations and schools is by state statute. They have to have a continuous improvement plan and several other plans, land trust plan, et cetera. We have done a fairly good job. There's always room for improvement on marrying their strategic plan to plans at schools. Not exactly the same by any means, but making sure both are interconnected. I'm going to jump into the academic priority following the protocol board chair laid out here. Speaking of the 3 objectives in academic priority, and you've had this slide deck in advance, so I'm not going to read them word for word. Yeah. Pre-K literacy performance, math performance, and then personalized competency-based learning are our 3 objectives in the academic priority. Underneath each of those, you'll see we've worked to identify measures. In those literacy and numeracy performance areas, the measures are a little bit easier than others, but because we go to proficiency on RISE as our measure. In personalized competency-based learning, that becomes a little bit more challenging for us to define that, and we've named 2 of those there. I'm not going to read it word for word again, but I just wanted to highlight for you, these are all actions under the objective of pre-K-12 literacy performance. So these are all of the actions that we have named. Transparently, again, talking with Connie, we didn't make all of these up. When we designed the strategic plan, there are definitely some actions that were new actions we wanted to take, but a lot of our work was just organizing a lot of the work that we already do. You'll notice too, some of these will fall off over time. So, or look a little bit different over time. So for example, support K-3 language essentials. We've had a couple of years of intensive professional learning around letters for elementary school teachers. That level of intensity is going to decrease, but supporting the learning and supporting the ideas will continue. Yes, part of the challenge with this is your turnover when you're in a large organization, as well as onboarding new individuals. Mathematics performance, here you see a lot of the action steps we plan to take. One that you see both, I think it's interwoven throughout, so some of these are repeats. For example, the bottom bullet, bridge family and community engagement. Bottom bullet in our mass, bridge family and community engagement. This was our solution on trying to have a Goldilocks level of priorities and a manageable amount of priorities. There was a lot of debate around a 4th priority of family and community engagement. And where we landed there was, instead of a 4th priority, interweaving family and community engagement into our action items and our objectives. Sorry, last one is actions with personalized competency-based learning. Here you see a lot of things that we already do. Again, you see bridging family and community engagement interwoven as well. Board Chair, following your protocol, before we shift, ready for questions.
Okay. questions on this part of it? Clark, do you have anything? Karen? Yes, let's go to Julie.
I did. On slide 8, can you go to slide 8?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, Julie, if you
Oh,
help me
Yeah.
get there.
Slide 8 was, to me, the one that says objectives academic priority at the top, had the 3, that.
Yeah.
It says here the measure for pre-K literacy is 44%. The measure for math will be a 40%. But up just a few slides where you have the strategic impact that we're looking at overall, it said that our goal is by 2027 for our math and English LA proficiency to be 39% or above. To me, those two numbers conflict. Can you explain what I'm not seeing there?
Not very well. And by that, I mean, I know the complexity in the answer, but I can't articulate it very well. I looked at Joan, superintendent, I think's prepared and able to. One of the challenges we have is some of our definitions and just putting them in quick bullets here. The
Yeah.
back end math of how we're doing things is a little bit more lengthy. And knowing you, I should have anticipated you'd hit me on that. Go ahead, superintendent.
So the quick answer is these numbers are grades 3 through 8, right? And RISE specific,
These are,
these are RISE, so grades 3 through 8.
okay, but they do say, they say pre-K to 12 literacy performance, but then it's 44% of grade 3 through 8.
As an indicator.
As the measure.
I
The
see.
percentages before also include like grade 9 and grade 10, ACT Aspire.
Yeah.
Plus and.
Say no more.
Some more, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks for helping me, superintendent. I should have known that.
Kim, do you want to grab a question?
Yeah, sure. I have a couple of questions. The first one just being in one of the earlier slides, we're talking again about one of the slides Julie had you look at, but graduation rate versus proficiency rates. And I know we talked about this in the previous study session, but I'm not sure that I grasp why we view those as apples and oranges. To me, what that means is we're graduating kids and only half of them are proficient at anything. And so I was hoping you could review that again, just to clarify why we have such disparity in those numbers.
Can I
Yeah.
chime in with that, Rick, too?
Oh,
Also,
yeah.
because I wrote that down. I just want you to make sure you are clear on the proficiency between graduation and proficiency on RISE versus the the proficiency on grades as well. So testing, I think I want to.
Yeah, that's good.
Add that in there.
Oh, third variable, yeah. Let me answer that, and we can go back and forth a little bit if I don't answer what you'd asked. I really like the vocabulary the superintendent uses around value proposition when it comes to graduation. Having been a principal at our alternative school where your goal is really to get credits and graduate, you quickly realize how easy you can make it to not be proficient and still earn credit. So part of where I really like the juxtaposition of these two things is if your proficiency is a little bit of a check on the value proposition of your diploma. To move the needle on graduation rate, to earn credit doesn't necessarily mean you need to be proficient on end-of-year assessments. Or to graduate, you don't need to be proficient on end-of-year assessments. That proficiency check on these end-of-year assessments helps us have a value proposition to our diploma. The third variable that you named, Nicole, is a little bit of our bridge in saying, at that classroom level, at that earning credit for this quarter, are you proficient on the standards? In the way that I have designed my course, I am checking for understanding and I am checking for proficiency. And in theory, the letter grade that I am assigning aligns with proficient on the standards that I'm teaching. We showed you some of our we showed our district community council some of our early correlations between grading and end-of-year assessments, and we're pretty happy with what we're starting to see there in trying to address this disparity between graduation rate and proficiency. Again, like the superintendent said, in fairness, the complexity in there is some gap here, meaning after grade 8, your rise isn't applicable. There's other end-of-year assessments, but how you incorporate all of those gets a little bit messy. Also, after grade 8, well, even in grade 6, 7, you start to run into elective courses that don't have end-of-year assessments, and how do you grapple with alignment there? I think of it as proficiency being a value proposition check on the diplomas that you're issuing. Superintendent?
Yeah, and I would just say, and that's why it's essential to have this point in our strategic plan. It's one thing that we could raise graduation rates all day long and not as simultaneously attend to the structures and systems to add that value proposition and proficiency, right? And so that's why you'll even see the graduation rate has an increased goal, but our degrees of proficiency have a more aggressive goal. Because while we want to raise them, we also want, as to everything Rick said, want to raise that and to do so in a way that is captured in the how we're going to do that. And so to have them both there is critical for the very question and concern that's been expressed. I'll say this, right? The graduation requirements are credit-based. They're credit-based. The courses they take and the courses they pass, or the courses that they make up. With that being said, a student could graduate with D's in every class. A college entrance exam that wouldn't get them into college. But at the end of the day, they're graduates, but I would argue and that they're not prepared for whatever post-secondary pursuits that they may choose to pursue. And so that's why coupling them, even in our strategic plan, is essential, so we can deliver on that promise to the children and their parents that we'll prepare them for life after high school.
So I guess I'm just, from a teacher point of view, I want to point this out, that a proficient, at least by our scale, is an A-. So that would mean if we're trying to equate proficiency with graduation, that means that you want every kid who graduates to have an A- in every class that they have. It doesn't mean that they haven't learned something. I still have kids in my class that have a B, that is, a 2, I don't know what that is, 2 something, 2, 3, thank you. But they've learned, but they're not proficient under that, like, they don't know their dotted half note, or whatever it was that I tested them on perfectly. Now, they've demonstrated some sort of proficiency in it, they're just not quite at a 3 or a 4 in my class. So having said that, I think that's where that disparity comes, and I understand, like, looking at that going, why are we, like, we want them to be proficient at 39%, but we're graduating them at 83%? That seems like a huge disparity, but keeping in mind where our proficiency is here, whereas what Dr. Nye is saying is that graduation is just, you have to get credit. You have to show that you've done enough to get credit.
So you're saying this proficiency is defined by our grading system, our PBL system, not by the score on the rise or whatever
That's a
other
good
tests?
question. What is it?
The back-end methodology in this goal is scores and rise.
Okay.
And again, an evolution. I think if that conversation continues and we wanted to work that measure, the measures part again, I mean, the theme you're going to hear from me tonight is where the rubber hits the road is the measures, and what are your methodologies behind those, and do those really work? That's a piece we're discovering in our district improvement steering committee, that we named them, but we're having these kinds of conversations around, is it the right measures? Does the data make sense? How do we want that to look? So it's going to be dynamic.
Thank you. That makes a lot more sense this time than it did last time, so I appreciate you going over that again. I also wanted to talk a little bit about PCBL. So I guess my understanding is it's a personalized competency-based learning, basically shapes, measures, tracks like graduate of granite characteristics and mindsets, and it ties assessments to these subjective metrics. And I feel like just with PCBL, I don't know, we're not really getting where we need to be for where parents send their kids to school in the first place. I think that PCBL, this idea of personalizing for everybody is first of all based on a bit of a false presupposition, the assumption that everybody is so unique that nothing we do can be applied across the board. We have to personalize to the nth level. And so it also seems a little bit of a paradox to me, like we are talking about, we're personalizing and customizing as much as we can, but it's all in order to create standardization. It's all in order to end up with these graduates of granite who all look the same and on the conveyor belt of this product of the students that we come out with. And so to me, that just feels paradoxical. And I'm not sure that it doesn't feel like the right path to claim that we're personalizing and standardizing at the same time. In addition, the PCBL requires technology, right? It requires a lot of AI, and some concerns I have with that just results in a lot of screen time. I think we all know there is research out there about the negative effects of a lot of screen time that kids have, and too much time working alone rather than being instructed. And the tech industry gains a lot of influence over education. And those three downsides, I think, they're pointed out actually in a policy and research brief that I found published by Utah State University that came out last November. So I can't claim credit for those, but I just wanted to bring that up. I mean, we're talking about research that we're looking at for these systems. Are we looking at research from both sides? And I, to be fair, haven't sent that out. I have done a lot of this last minute because I've had a time crunch this week, but I can. I'm happy to send that brief out to the board, to the superintendent after the meeting, just so you can see what I'm referring to. So I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are on those concerns about the technology, the lack of time with the teacher, spending a lot of time working alone, and the paradox of customizing in order to standardize.
Yeah, philosophically, I know the committee who worked on this side spent some time grappling with some of the things that you brought up, perhaps not necessarily the paradox, but I understand what you're saying. What I will say is I think once you delve in or start having conversations around personalization, what does that really mean? That becomes challenging. The thing I would point to here are our action steps. So by no means is this the definition of personalization, but it's our way of sitting down, again, going back to that map or that plan, that shared understanding, and saying, okay, we have an objective of personalizing and emphasizing competency-based in our learning. What kinds of actions, what kinds of things will we do to promote that? And you can read them here. Some of those go to technology types of things, like granted online course development and engagement. But in that, from a technological standpoint, I don't think that's so much about the technology, although that's how it's delivered. It's more about offering options to students other than necessarily being in a classroom with a teacher. So the two go hand in hand a little bit. Promote effective use of technology tools in instruction. I think Chris Larson, if he is here from Ed Tech, would very much be about personalization is differentiation for students. And yes, technology can assist in that, but it's not the primary driver. The primary driver is differentiation with technology as a tool to try and help with those things. And I think many times technology gets put first and foremost on personalization, where no, it's secondary, it's helpful, it's a tool, but the idea is options, personalization in the sense that differentiation's happening based on student needs. And you can see that globally in terms of here's different course offerings from a macro side, to a micro side of, in my class, I'm differentiating the assignments or the work for each student, and then all the things in between. I don't know if that gave you an answer. It's more of my thinking or my response to the question. Superintendent, you're eager to.
I look at it, and each one of my children went a different pathway. So as long as things were offered, and I'm grateful that Granite is large enough to offer a lot, then each one of them chose a different way to graduate. And if, we want that ultimate graduate, I am grateful that there are parents and other adults encouraging and helping the children choose their pathway or their the way they want to finish school. I think it's it's very helpful that way, and having to me then that was personalized in their journey as a whole.
Speaks a little bit to that macro side of having different options, different pathways. On the micro side, again, just I think a classroom teacher, just that paradox again. I like that idea, that paradox of standardization but differentiation. I would say even on a micro side, every classroom teacher has to grapple with that every day. They're trying to differentiate for every student, but at the same time, they've got this group of students that they need to be organized with and have some standardization and manage them as well. And it's not an easy thing. I think differentiation is probably the most difficult thing in teaching, especially when you have such diverse students in your classroom.
And I'll just start there with the micro, thinking about what does personalized competency-based learning look like. Say in a first grade class, they're learning how to read. Early literacy is one of our priorities. And so when we think about personalized competency-based learning, I may be going through a learning unit, and I've got a group of students who are struggling with phonemic awareness. Out of 30 kids, I've got 10 that are really struggling with phonemic awareness in their journey to learn how to read. Meanwhile, I've got 20 kids that aren't struggling with phonemic awareness, so that teacher working with a paraprofessional creates some small learning groups and provides that personalized learning for the group, in that case, of kids who are struggling. The standardization is the early literacy in this point, and I'll get back to the specifics. And so a lot of that standardization is determined through state standards, things that the state passes in board rule that says these are the things that we want our students in the state of Utah to learn and know and be able to do. And so then we get the opportunity to determine the how, and that's where personalized competency-based learning. So at the very micro, it's, okay, what does this child need? Well, they're struggling with phonemic awareness. This child's not. They're going to need some different. They're going to work in some small groups there. Getting up to high school or junior high and high school, a child may want to go into aviation. Well, we've got a pathway for that, right? Or they may choose to go into composites, or they may choose to want to do an associate's degree. And through concurrent enrollment opportunities, we make those arrangements. And so when we think personalized at the micro and the macro, the standardization, and I may need a little bit more clarity on that, other than to say, when we think standardization, I think in the how it's being referenced around maybe the graduate of Granite characteristics those are collective commitments, right? Those are common values, if you will, that we, as public education, and in Granite specifically, have rallied around and saying, well, these are the values that we feel public education could help us with. And perhaps those do become standardized there because it is a collective commitment of the individual and the larger society. Now, how can still be, all of it is open for discussion. And so I'm just trying to tease apart what we mean by standardization versus personalization. Some of the standardization, again, comes external. Some of it comes as self-imposed, but in working with parents. But then the personalization is at the individual student level. Recognizing, as Rick said, it's very difficult to personalize everything. So there have to be some standards of expectation that we align ourselves to, that then again align resources to. And then as far as screen time, we're just as concerned about that of any school, any district. In fact, most of our schools have built in within, as an action step, built into their continual improvement plan, an element of student engagement that does speak explicitly to minimizing the amount of screen time and in front of technology being the primary driver, and having that positive engagement with the teacher who then delivers that instruction. And so I would agree there needs to be a healthy balance in there, and our schools are very well aware of it. Something that emerged, I think, per our experience with COVID and reliance on technology, but now that we're back in person and have been for quite some time, we need to intentionally make sure that we get back into that positive engagement. So if that doesn't answer, I'm happy to have a further discussion around standardization and personalization. But the concept is, the overarching concept is under personalized competency-based learning is how do we meet the needs of a child and the desires of a parent for on behalf of their children, and helping define that, and then being able to create the systems to realize what it is that they would also want for their students.
I also wanted to just share a metaphor that was really helpful for me with students, because my students usually took very unique paths because they were alternative high school students. And so I would always say, it's like we're all trying to get to the Jazz game, but there are many different routes to get to the Jazz game. So you went this way, and I went this way, and other students went this way, and a lot of them ended up on I-15. But you didn't, and you're over here trying to figure it out. And not only that, but we didn't all start at the same spot. And not only that, but we don't all have the same transportation. I have a car, you have a bus pass, you're getting a ride from a friend, so there are all these different, we do end at the same spot, and that is, I think your idea, this is a really fascinating concept of like we're individualizing, but really so that we can spit the same thing out. It's a really fascinating concept. But somehow that metaphor is helping me understand why both of those can exist at the same time.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Last year when we went to the NSBA conference, I went to a session where they talked about proficiency-based learning, and it was a school district in Colorado, and they had all the students on computers, and they were on the computer every day, and they went through their lessons, and they passed them off, and as they passed them off, they moved on to the next, grade. They had to do so many. And so there were some kids who were in 3rd grade, but they were actually in 4th grade or 5th grade. And it I was like, oh, they're on the computer all day long. And I think there's this idea that personalized competency-based learning is that it is kids on the computer just doing their own pathway. That might be some of it is what I'm looking at. Is that correct, that you're saying continual granted online course development, that might be the fit for some of those kids? But hopefully we have so many more pathways for them to show proficiency, and that's what that is supposed to, am I correct in saying that's what this should be addressing? That we have to have ways for them to show proficiency and to do learning, correct?
Yeah, correct. The interesting thing with, our Granted Online, you've seen presentations on that before, is time proves some things. We know that those options offered there. We know what the supply and demand is. There are certain courses that students take there, and the wide range that's offered. Secondary Math 2, Quarter 3 isn't taken very much. Health, Quarter 1 is taken a lot. So, the data that we see in terms of student desire, so sometimes that component, maybe this is trying to bridge that standardization versus individualization, and maybe a way to do that is choice. And seeing, rather than just saying everyone's going to do this, offering out the choice and seeing where individuals are going, help inform us.
But I see where this concern is heading is maybe an action that I can't remember if we see it later on in one of the other strands, but we really need to train our teachers.
Yeah. So my thought around that is, I think the superintendent alluded to this as well, and I lived this when Canvas first came out as an LMS in 2010. It was like pulling teeth to get teachers to even be interested in it. Because it was just so new in the idea of what it was. And I think a tipping point happened that now we're trying to grapple with and figure out was COVID, where we had to move to that modality and leverage that more. And I've heard anecdotally, I've heard some concerns around using, and remember, every student has access to a Chromebook while in school in Granite too. So using the Chromebook and the technology and the learning management system as spending too much time in the you do part of teaching. If I, just to back up and frame it, you've got some I do as the teacher, you get up and have a portion where you're explaining, and then you have the we do, where we're working together. I'm going around working with students in groups, and then they have the you do, where you're finishing out. In Granite, we really try to emphasize we do, and believe that that's where the most learning happens. We can anecdotally pick on the teacher who gets up and lectures all period, the I do, or we can also pick on the anecdotal teacher who just hands out all the worksheets and it's you do the whole time. The piece that we want to be cautious of around the technology and that thinking is having the right and healthy balance of I do, we do, you do, and not just having these become the 2023 go do the worksheet all period.
And that error has a huge impact on attendance. Because students say, I don't need to be in class today because I can just get it on
I can just go
camera.
do
Yeah.
it somewhere else. Yeah.
So just briefly, one of the action items under this is to continue to investigate the best practices, and that's where that research base comes in around PCBL. But not only do that, design what is a PCBL framework, and part of that would require us, as per our own plan, to engage stakeholders, all stakeholders around this notion, right? As we continue to refine and polish this practice, but to also include diverse school populations, their needs, communication plans shared with school leaders and community councils. In other words, engage in more feedback around this issue. And that's where I say that it's not laminated. We need to understand these concerns, be able to articulate what that means for us, and then being able to also engage a large audience, those we serve, right, and provide these services to, and hear their voices to help us understand what it is that they would like for their children.
To not take up too much time, I have questions still about characteristics which are mentioned under this topic, but I think they also apply to the social skills and dispositions, so I'll ask those questions in the next section.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, though, that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate all of the comments and input. I think we can take away more of the discussion about the customization versus standardization piece of it, for sure.
And for my part, I want to confirm, there are classes that I've been in or my kids have said, all we do is sit on the computer, and really, that is a concern. That should not be the way, why are we paying a teacher to be there if that's all that's going to happen?
Too much you do. And it's
way
the
too much you do.
2023 version of worksheets all period.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we learned how to do this. Put the technology on the. I love some of the stuff that I can put on Canvas now that
Yeah.
I used to have to do in person. But
Right.
wow, this is great. But at the same time, there is a huge element of we need to have the I do and we do, the big we do part of it. So I do want to. I agree with that, and that is necessary. Connie, did you have anything to add or questions? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and go on.
Social skills and dispositions have three objectives, and I couldn't fit them all on one slide, so I've made a slide for each. One of those is tiered interventions and supports. MTSS is something you've heard from us, and we've talked about PBIS as well as part of the measure with our PBIS implementation on macro on a school level, working through tiered interventions and supports. Let me just quickly, three actions under this, tiered interventions and supports. Continue to sustain our PBIS efforts, integrate social skills and disposition components into lesson design. And this is very much in its infancy. This was a piece thinking through how are we purposefully going to design our lessons. In the past, were teachers teaching responsibility? Yes. But how are we going to be thoughtful and purposeful in that? Implement graduative granted characteristics and determine alignment with PBIS as well. A second objective is attendance. And attendance there, we emphasize the measure here in this because this is one that we're running up against as a squirrely way to try and develop a methodology or business rules around how we're going to measure attendance. On its surface, it seems easy, but when then you start looking at variables, it gets challenging, and we're grappling with that right now. Attendance is always a concern, but if you've talked to a high school principal lately, this is their major concern. Attendance is a real big challenge at the high school level. Actions we've identified within attendance is integrated attendance strategies and incentives into the school-wide PBI system, GSD behavior team, shaping policies, communication, collecting data, reviewing and responding to trends. This is a nice way of saying we don't have a solution figured out, but we're working towards having those conversations to figure attendance out. I often tease if any principal who tells you that they don't have a tardy problem is lying. These things are challenging, and it doesn't mean that you don't work on them, but there isn't an easy, simple solution. Last is identify and provide professional learning to school attendance team, disseminate, analyze, evaluate attendance data, facilitate information sharing. So again, a fancy way of saying we got some work to do in collaborating and having a collective commitment to attendance and identifying practices that we can do to try and improve that. Third objective, third objective in the social skills and dispositions priority is a sense of belonging. And this flows a little bit into attendance. This is a strategy often explored and discussed around improving attendance. That idea, if I belong, if I'm a Olympus Titan and I feel connected to the school and I have a sense of belonging, that's going to move the needle on my attendance as well. So again, identifying measures within sense of belonging that we're going to put towards our efforts, figuring that out, the actions that we have in sense of belonging. Again, is professional learning, talking through collective teacher efficacy, surveying students and getting a sense of where students' well-being is, but also are they feeling like they belong? Having that student voice, elevating that student voice off is another phrase I've stolen from the superintendent as well. But that being important to know, are you feeling like you belong? And having their feedback. Communicating with parents in preferred language is a no-brainer, but can often be times challenging with the number of languages we have spoken. Creating a welcoming and collaborative environment where we honor and partner with families, increase engagement with students and families. So oftentimes this sense of belonging and attendance, we can't do it alone. We need to partner with families and are always looking for ways to do a better job of that partnership. So protocol-wise, ready for questions.
Clark? Anything? Karen? Chris? Julie?
Thanks for being transparent about not having a solution to the attendance problem. I appreciate you just saying that. That's I think that shows a lot of trust, and we certainly support you in trying to figure that out. I wonder if there's a way for a parent to see if their child is a regular attender, because absences can add up without a person or a parent realizing it. Asking for a friend.
Yes, there is, Julie. You see it on their weekly report.
Well, I can see how many absences. I'm wondering if I can see the percent of how often they're because you like see an A here or there. Very different from seeing your child is only there 80% of the time or something. I don't necessarily need to know how to do that. If I know it is possible, I can figure it out. But
I see. So what I'm wrapping my head around is you get the calls and you get again, I'm going to use micro, you get the day notification, but what it sounds like you're saying is it could be valuable for this macro or global look at your student, where you can step back and say, my student only attends 72% of the time. And I remember I had those A's and I got those calls, but this global look at what's their attendance.
Well, and, like, when I have 4 students in secondary school, so what is that, 32 classes, so if one of them misses one class, I get a phone call. And so, if I get 4 phone calls a week, that doesn't necessarily mean that my kids have low attendance.
Yeah.
But so it's really hard for a parent to keep track of what kid that was and what's going on, especially on the secondary level, I think.
And perhaps too, you kind of get numb to it, like, hey, between my 4 kids and all the classes, there's going to be a call every day, so I ignore. Yeah, that's great feedback. I think as the board is well aware, as we shift SISs and move to app-based reporting and communication, that's something I've made note of here.
Kim, did you have a question you want to throw in there?
Thank you. I think I've told the board before, I guess, my concern about grading kids on characteristics. I don't particularly feel that it's an ethical thing to do, but whether we feel that way or not, I was curious, if the tables were turned a little bit, how would teachers feel if they were graded on their personality traits rather than their performance? I don't know, any of the administrators in here, how you would feel if that's how you were graded? Even our superintendent, if the board decided what correct personality traits we wanted you to exhibit, and if you didn't, we graded you on those, would that make any difference to how we view the grading of characteristics? Just wanted to throw that out there for thought and feedback.
I'd take a stab at it first. I think certainly it doesn't equate, apples to apples, but I will say, if you take a look at our administrative standards, or you take a look at our educator standards, domain 4, there's 4 domains in the standards. Domain 4 speaks to some of those soft skills, if you will, ability to collaborate with others, their communication and how good that is. I think in looking at those, you would see some examples of those kinds of skills. I guess I would equate to the teacher piece. We know student learning is the most important, and that is embedded within our evaluation of teachers or their grading. I'm saying someone's evaluation equates to grading, making a little bit of a stretch here. But it's not, that evaluation is not solely based on student scores. There's several things. And within the standards, it does name, some of the standards do have indicators that align with, again, communication, ability to collaborate, et cetera, being on time. Those are found within how teachers are graded.
I'm going to take a stab at this. I would actually like to point out that absolutely we do judge teachers and our superintendent on these skills. If you look at the skills, when teachers are evaluated, they're evaluated on communication. How well are they communicating messaging out to the students? How well are they reporting to parents? Hard work and resilience, absolutely. Are they in their classrooms? Are they working hard? Are they working hard through challenging? Are they resilient as they look at students on different levels, trying to come up with differentiation that was already noticed? Respect, are they respectful? Respect goes both ways, and so if we're requiring our students to be respectful, I would absolutely expect that teacher's going to be, show respect to their class as well. Dependability, are they there? Are they showing up? Are they doing their job? Our responsibility, are they following through with their core instruction? Are they doing what they should be doing? Absolutely, we're going to judge Superintendent Nye on those very social skills. Now, we don't have our students out there with a little, report card grading their teachers, but I think collectively as a whole, absolutely, there is a great correlation. excuse me, a big correlation on. These skills that we're asking our students to rise up and do, these social skills, we can't ask the students to be doing those unless we're expecting those of our educators. And so to me, they're both there. But that's just me. So if anyone else wants to jump in.
In my company, we also evaluate based on these skills. We evaluate our employees.
So also, if you think about it, there's a lot of kids that do that also to their teachers because there's classes that are a lot more popular than other classes that they take just because of the teachers, the way they teach and their communication and all those things that Karen just mentioned. So I think students do it all the time to their teachers.
I also I thought about this too. I mean, we've always had a citizenship grade, at least, and I don't know, I don't remember if you went to K-12 school here or not, but we all had a citizenship grade on our report card. We've always had this, it's just been called something different and maybe presented in a different way. I still give my students, where I am, I give them an H or an S or an honors or a satisfactory needs improvement, and I can give them comments, hey, they're not turning in assignments, they're not participating in classroom discussion, or so I've always been able to give them that grade and that feedback. I think the nice thing to me, at least about this as a teacher, is that before that particular grade has always been connected to attendance as well. So if a kid has been tardy to my class 3 times or 4 times, I have to give them a U. Now, they can be the best kid in the world and can be doing great on everything else, but I give them a U because that's our policy in our district, right? And if they have a U, that means that, if it's high school, they can't graduate, or they have to make it up, or, they can't participate on a sports team. So I like that it's a little bit more separated out, and that we're not saying you're a horrible student because you've been tardy 4 times, and that's it, right? We have a little bit more of a feedback system for that. And I don't know the specifics for what we do with teachers here, but at least my students, I do send out a thing at the end of the year, and they do give feedback to me on what I've done well and what I can improve on. And we are supposed to, as part of my evaluation process, I do look at that, and I do set goals for the next year depending on what they say. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, it helps, and I appreciate the discussion and perspectives. I guess from my point of view, if you take a specific example, like some of these can be very specific to what a student actually believes, what their beliefs are, and we then get to grade them on whether those beliefs match up to how we want them to believe. And that is not appropriate in my view. So I feel like we have a rubric, yes, but the rubric doesn't prevent students from being judged because perhaps it was considered disrespectful that they didn't use a pronoun that somebody wanted them to use or something like that, or communication rubric doesn't prevent them from being graded down for that either. So that's just one specific example. I think that it opens it up for kids to be able to be graded based on their belief systems, which is not where we want to be.
Can you just clarify that a little bit more? I'm not sure I understand what you're saying as far as their belief systems and how that is in contrast to what we're looking at.
So if we're grading a child on respect, we can mark them down because they did not feel right about using a pronoun for another child who wanted to be called a certain pronoun, because we can view that as not showing respect to that other child. Where that is something that somebody could have as a sincerely held belief that we don't believe that's the way things work, basically. But our system allows for them to be penalized for that. And again, I'm just throwing out an example that comes to my head.
Yeah, and I hear that, and I get that. And obviously, students need to be allowed, their belief systems. On that point, if that were my child, I would encourage them to go have a private conversation with that teacher and just explain the why. And I found that teachers are reasonable. If you communicate with them and say, this is what is happening, I just want you to know that as a parent, I'm okay with that, my student not using a pronoun, and I would ask that you do not dock his or her grade for anything tied to that. And I think, I really believe in our teachers that they would back that parent up.
A thought with that too is I think perhaps a glass half full look at, the way that we've operated before around citizenship was everything just lumped into one grade. And there is some value in disaggregating that a little bit to get a little more better clarity around rationales for different things. When everything was lumped into a citizenship grade, it was very difficult for a parent to get feedback or to be able to know some nuance or different in that reporting to them. Again, glass half full, separating those out, it's a little bit easier to have that conversation when perhaps on the respect report, it's lower. And you can then approach that teacher and even hold them accountable to, well, why are you saying that? And let's have that discussion and let me share my perspective. But that was a little bit harder when everything was lumped into one citizenship reporting.
I think it's important also to remember that no matter what we talk about, we do not live in a black and white world. Everything has nuance. Every single thing that we do in a day, including academic grading, including even how you drive your car and follow the law, has so much nuance to it, right? And so there's no doubt about it that we rely on our teachers to be wise about that nuance. And that's a good reason why we evaluate them on these things like dependability, communication, because they need these skills the same as our students do. And I get what you're saying, Karen, about if I were that parent, but there's also this problem that not all parents are going to go in and advocate, which we all know is real. And so I think it is a real issue, but I think we have to remember these are not black and white issues. They're very nuanced.
I'd only say, and I appreciate that, how do we navigate that? Because in my own mind, I'm seeing a scenario where if a child is bullying and harassing a student over a pronoun, that's a level of disrespect and a level of intervention that's different than if a child, just like, I don't feel comfortable, and then that's a different conversation, right? And so to that end, it's like, what is the gradient or how is it nuanced in terms of how students engage with each other? The bullying and harassing, and I know, I just use it as an example, is one hand, and it is disrespectful on a different level, right, than just maybe a conscious objection to something that the family or the child believes. But in either scenario, we work with the family and determine what that might look like.
And I just bring that example up just because I feel like it's a current issue, so it's top of mind. But I appreciate the discussion and the feedback. That's really all I have on that topic. So.
And I think that's a really great, that's a good example for what you see. As I look through the others, I guess I'm just thinking, like, where you see that in any others. Do you see that in other parts of this, or is it really mostly that respect category that you see that?
I know communication, I thought, was potential for that same kind of issue as well. I don't have it up in front of me right now.
But I agree that they could all have very cultural implications, no, they're not communicating with me, they're not looking at me in the eye when they need to learn to do that, or someone isn't punctual, and so we're going to dock them when maybe punctuality isn't their main focus of their culture, or it's their parent, which that is my case. And so, yeah, I can see where some of those belief systems, or maybe not belief systems, but cultural systems could complicate this.
Yeah, and I agree with that. So the communication part, it says seek help and ask questions when needed, understand how comments and actions impact others and or the classroom as a whole, work cooperatively in a group or team setting, contribute to own learning and the learning of others. So, I can see how maybe there might be some cultural things that we need to be sensitive to as teachers, and I would hope that as teachers we are. I know I've got the shyest kid in the world in my class, and she just talks so soft, and actually found a black widow spider and killed it for me the other day. I would never, because she doesn't necessarily speak out in class, yet I know in other ways how she has communicated with me and how that she is capable of doing it. And I would never give her like a 2 because she just doesn't talk to me. I just know that's her personality. I'm sensitive to that. I'm not expecting her to be the kid that yells out in the middle of class, right? So I would hope, and I truly do hope, Kim, that if you hear about anything like that, or if anybody does, that they, bring it to the teacher, bring it to the principal, bring it to the SLIDs, whoever it does, that we really look at that, because we do need to be sensitive. I totally agree, we do.
Thank you. That's all from me.
Connie, did you have anything?
Moving us along then to talent development priority. Again, it's recognizing the importance of the humanistic work that we do, and our driver being those individuals in our organization. Taking a look at that, we have 3 objectives. The first one is recruitment and retention. I've listed a couple of measures there that we are looking at annually, but we also have some leading indicators that we look at through our district improvement steering committee, saying, are we on track, are we not? What might we need to adjust? Again, just plugging this idea that this plan isn't something we want up on the shelf. We've created a structure with the district improvement steering committee where we are taking a look at each of these. We're taking a look at one of these measures every month and saying, okay, what might need to change? Recruitment and retention obviously being very important. Having to start over and over and start over and start over is problematic. So we want to make sure that these are high. Actions that we plan to do there, we provide new teacher support, administrator support as well. Oftentimes, because teachers are the largest employee group, we default to talking teachers, but we have other employee groups as well. Conduct our APPLE, or Alternate Pathway to Professional Educator license. We have about 50 to 70 individuals that are engaged in this way of earning their license each year. Prioritize competitive compensation, provide teacher growth recognition, develop recruitment activities, and conduct climate surveys. All of these are attempts to improve recruitment and retention. These are all actions that we have named. Under professional learning, again, we have some measures for that. I want to speak to the actions for just a minute. So taking a look at our professional learning and our opportunity map, this has been interesting in engaging and partnering with different individuals around just being organized in the professional learning that we're offering, and recognizing there's only so much time in the day. This is always a challenge. Differentiating for teachers or for employees on their professional learning is just as difficult as differentiating for students in the classroom. It's not easy, and we want to try and be better at that. We have, every month, we have principal professional learning where for the morning, half a day, principals are coming in and receiving information on things like special education law, policy, IDEA. They're receiving best instructional practices, instructional leadership, and then also have some time where they can collaborate with each other around immediate problems that they have and want to talk to other principals who are living the dream, if you will, on ways that they've been able to solve problems. We have a commitment to investing in coaching in Granite, recognizing that you can have a professional learning event, and that's worth something, but where you really gain the value is an opportunity to hear that, go practice it, and then receive feedback on that practice. So we're seeing instructional coaching and this conversation around coaching or practice and feedback and practice being very valuable. Support PLCs or professional learning communities, offer endorsement opportunities, and facilitate continuous improvement. Really trying to embed the thinking around, have a plan, work on that plan, check to see how that plan's going, and making adjustments in what you're doing. Oftentimes, that gets relegated to more of a business speak, but that's what professional learning communities do. As third grade teachers, we gave this lesson, how did it go? We had to just check to see, now based on how it went, what adjustments are we going to make? So the two ideas, continuous improvement and PLCs, are very much the same thing: plan, do, check, adjust. and investing in that cycle and making those connections. Last is performance evaluation, and we have a couple of measures I've listed there, but want to hit the action items. So enhance our performance evaluation system, improve consistency and congruence, invest in coaching, and facilitate continuous improvement. So again, you see that invest in coaching and facilitating continuous improvement bullets repeated. These are a couple of very important themes in both professional learning and performance evaluation. And those two things can't really be separated. They're yin and yang. There's a lot of overlap between those. Wanted to just plug for a minute again our principal professional learning this year. We've spent this entire year our events that we have and then coaching by their directors around how do you have feedback conversations with teachers? How do you help teachers who improve in areas that they might want to improve or in areas that they aren't able to identify that you're receiving feedback from various stakeholders that they need to improve. So we've invested this year on improving our performance evaluation system through professional learning for our administrators. That's where I went, the standards are very much on my mind because that becomes your touchstone around having these feedback conversations. That's our talent development priority.
Clark, do you have anything?
On those percentages that you had at the very beginning, what is the most recent measurement in terms of actual percentages compared to those goals?
So on this performance evaluation objective, 95% of all contract employees will complete the professional growth and learning process. This, again, transparently, is a little bit of a hoop jumping measure. So our PLC, our PG&E process is identifying how I think I'm doing on standards, and I go into the platform and do that. I receive feedback from my supervisor on how they interpret I'm doing on those standards. Then mid-year, I go back in and I reflect on progress that I think I've made. Oh, sorry, when I do a self-evaluation, I also name goals. Then mid-year, I review those goals myself and I review them with my supervisor, and then end of year, we review those goals and the standards and where I'm at. That process, checking the box on that process is not incredibly difficult. Having it be authentic and meaningful, that becomes the challenge. And I'm probably preaching to the choir. Most everyone here, we have jobs, and we know that this is the challenge, not only for our organization, but for every organization, having meaningful growth conversations rather than just checking boxes.
Understood. If you go back a couple more to the recruitment and retention percentages, which maybe is a little bit more quantifiable. Yep. How do those, what are our actual results in the most recent assessment?
We're on track. And I appreciate you saying quantifiable, because this is something we grappled with. We have tried to make all of these measures as quantifiable as possible. We reviewed these 2 months ago. Patrick Flanagan shared with us where we were at, and it looked like we were on track to hit these numbers this year.
Thank you. My last question in that regard is with the contract positions being filled at the beginning of each school year. I can think of a few reasons why it would not be 100%, but what is the most common reason why we would not be able to fill a contract position by the start of the school year? Is there one particular set of circumstances that is most often observed, or is it just so many one-offs that it makes up about that 5% number?
One-offs is a big piece, but I will, and you've heard this and know this, special education is a challenge for us. We do not have the preparation programs giving us the special education teachers, or feeding us, if you will, special education teachers. We have the one-offs, especially in our CTE realms, et cetera, but special education is a challenge.
Okay. Additionally, that 5%, why wouldn't it be 100? It's the one-offs too, where we might receive word from a teacher, life circumstance, they decided to retire. And again, there's a window there that of opportunity. If they let us know 2 weeks before school, things like that. So we can quantify all that. Into the first measure, 85% nationally in high impacted schools, attrition rate hovers around 30%. It's about 25% in non-Title I schools, for an example. And so what we want to do, and fortunately we're on better track, but to have a goal of 15% really is remarkable and would challenge the national trend. And so we have to evaluate what are the reasons why teachers are leaving the profession, why are they transferring within district, why are they going to other districts, but it's really just getting a handle on that, again, to be able to improve what it is for our educators who do work for us that makes other educators want to come to our district, and those that we have want to stay.
Can you go to the slide, Rick, of the actions?
For
Please?
this one, just
Yeah.
the very next, yep.
Yep, very next. Thank you. I didn't know exactly what order. Let me just, oh, no, one more.
Professional learning.
No,
and then
okay, it's
actions,
the last one. Go to the last one in this section.
Performance evaluation and actions.
No, one more. No, oh, wait. I don't know. Anyway, go back. Okay, now I'm with you. Go back.
Okay.
This one says professional learning. Go back. There you go, that one. Sorry.
Professional learning.
Yeah, sorry. I know that we're piloting a lot in coaching this year. I know there's a pilot that has had like elementary coaches be hired for the first time this year to go and teach teachers how to teach math better. Sometimes I feel like at the district level, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, and then things get a little boggled when it reaches the school level. I have, there's a scenario where a teacher got hired as an elementary coach, and then when she was placed in a junior high. And then at the end, and then she ended up being used as a paraeducator. So here we are saying that we have talent development and coaching, and this particular person was used as a para, which was not what the job description said, and it wasn't even the right level. You know, she said if it had been posted secondary, she never would have applied. She would have never left her elementary job that she was very happy in. She was just excited to go and help other teachers. And then when she was placed for next year permanently at a junior high, she's like, I'm out. And then she asked to be surplused. Then she couldn't be surplus because the position was going away. Then the GEA became an obstacle in her getting a job. And I'm here to tell you, there is no teaching shortage at the elementary level in Granite School District. So she was forced, even though we kind of set her up for failure, she was forced to go and interview at jobs and interview several places. So this looks really nice on paper. I'm wondering how efficient we are in implementing it and doing it the right way.
I think the example you name, and not to have a scapegoat here, but I think we are guilty of that, being a little bit squirrelier. You were even nice in calling it piloting and trying some things. For your example around the math, specifically math coaching, I think the ESSER opportunities have this example is an ESSER opportunity. So I think we have experimented and invested more in some coaching and various ideas since we've had ESSER. And the downside of those opportunities is the upside of those opportunities is their opportunities, and we can pilot some things and we can test some things and we can invest some areas to see if it can move the needle or not. The downside is when ESSER came so quick and fast and we're on this spending, you got to use it or lose it kind of money, it's resulted in a little bit of what you're saying, in that perhaps we haven't been as systematic and as tight on making sure the left hand knows what the right hand's doing, because we've had such an influx of money and looking to use that to the betterment of students, but it's had some results like you described.
Yeah, I would just ask, I mean, I'm fine with I'm happy that our administrators are getting professional learning opportunities. I do believe in coaching. It's not that I don't. If we're going to put all these resources to it, I think we need a better process, a better system to, first of all, take care of our employees and take care of them well when things don't end up being what they agreed we didn't hold our end of the bargain there, and then we didn't really offer any help as well. Some of that was for various things, but anyway, I'm not going to get into that here. But I hope that systems are in place so that we're not wasting those resources, because our resources are limited and we need to make sure we're using them well.
So are you strict on 6:30? Are we trying to wrap up or?
Clark's like, yes.
Okay.
I feel like we need to finish this section. Thanks for asking, Chris. We do still have a few slides after this. I don't know how much you had planned,
Fast.
Rick. Are you guys okay going till 7 with this and then us taking a little bit of a break? Okay, let's go ahead and finish this up, Chris. Go ahead
Okay,
with your
so
question.
my question's about the climate surveys that are on this. I just have some questions about how that gets reported and who sees those and is there actions with those climate surveys? I mean, I just want to understand that aspect a little bit better.
Yeah, this flows a little bit into, again, these three aren't quite easy to totally compartmentalize, so it flows a little bit into performance evaluation. So part of an administrator's performance evaluation, all of our performance evaluations include multiple measures. So part of a principal's performance evaluation includes stakeholder feedback, climate surveys of how what's going on at the school and how things are being reported by those who are living it. So, those are used as one of multiple measures to have some conversations around goal setting for administration. So again, stakeholder feedback, climate surveys happening in a school, this example that I'm giving, the administrator supervisor sees those and they have a reflective conversation around, well, what do you think? What about this? And typically, it is a reflective conversation. Sometimes it has to become directive, but 9 times out of 10, just having the data in front of them, just having that climate survey, that feedback in front of them, human nature is to reflect on that and start to think, how can I adjust?
So so like when I was on community council, they asked us to do it, but the principal is the one that handed it to us and then collected it back, and it was kind of awkward because if I want to say what my true feelings are, am I really wanting the person that I'm talking about to be collecting those? So is that the standard of how that is actually administered, or is that maybe just what my personal survey was? Is
that was your
the norm?
experience,
Okay.
yeah. And in fairness to that principal, perhaps they genuinely were excited about receiving feedback and were looking for that, but I get your point. It's not maybe as anonymous and authentic as it could have been.
Okay, so that's not the norm? You're saying the norm is to be more,
That's not our
Send an
standard
email or
approach. I
whatever.
think
Okay.
that was the principal's desire to get some feedback.
okay. It wasn't recent, just.
Can I piggyback on that,
But
Chris's
anyway,
question?
yeah.
What, as far as the climate surveys, I mean, I'm trying to remember when I've done them, is it for teachers specific, school specific, principal specific, all of them? Can you explain that a little bit more?
So for a principal, feedback for a principal's growth, there's really 2 avenues. One's teacher survey, and then one's also our stakeholder feedback survey. I'm going to say those, but I'm also going to honestly say we've identified challenges within those as well. We know on our stakeholder feedback, I think we literally talked about this today, it's a self-selecting survey and the response rate's not as high as we'd like, so we start questioning the reliability and validity of that data. So this is a piece that we're continually working through. Which is a teacher feedback survey, very systematized. We feel confident we'll get some good, reliable, and valid data on that one.
Julie, did you have?
Yeah. I sat in a presentation at the legislature where the State Board of Education, I hope I'm getting this all right, said the reasons why, when they studied the teacher shortage, why teachers were leaving the profession. And the number 1 thing was leadership, and the number 2 thing was salary. And so I really appreciate the effort that you is put here into our principals. I think all our employees deserve to have really great leaders. And so thank you for that. I'm noticing that all of these indicators are about contract employees. And so we know that we have a lot of turnover for our employees who are not on contract and that they're really important to what we do here. So I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about the decision to just focus on contract employees.
Honestly, I don't know that that was a conscious decision. I think again, we tend to gravitate in our conversations to our largest employee group, and sometimes that frames our conversations perhaps more than it should, where we should be taking a look at stepping back a little bit and saying, yeah, that is our largest employee group, but what about classified? What about some of these others? To what degree, without trying to maintain that Goldilocks balance in our strategic plan where we're not everything to everyone and thus nothing to anyone, how do we incorporate some of those other employee groups into our consideration, especially around this talent development priority? That I made a note that that's a piece we need to think of.
Yeah, I think every employee deserves to have talent development. And I also think that we can expand our minds about what those non-contract employees can do in terms of the amount of value that we can get from them. When I was interning at another school, they actually provided professional development. Their non-contract employees, they invited to all their professional development, in fact, expected them to be there. And I saw them work on a different level than I've seen them work in our schools. And the teachers could rely on them for much more. And at least the ones in my school had been there for years and years and years. So I think that's an area where where this might be able to be fluid with some consideration. The other thing is that one area I see is a huge opportunity that we have here is to have an impact on our culture as Granite School District. You know, things like loving innovation, allowing people to bring their unique talents to us, growth mindset, trust, communication, all those exciting things that could make our district really vibrant. I think we have huge gains to make in that. And things that make this a great place to work. And I feel like talent development is the area where that could be addressed. And I've had conversations with many of you in this room about this issue, and I know Rich knows I feel strongly about this. But I just wonder where you see that cultural piece fitting in. I mean, we do have the climate surveys. I feel like that's different than what I'm talking about.
Yeah, here's a data that I'm connecting, and it is fairly narrow. Again, we just finished saying sometimes we'll look.
And I see we don't want to be everything to everyone. To me, for me personally, I think this is a priority.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the importance of leadership, and that's not lost on me, and I think on a lot of the groups. So again, looking at our principal professional learning this year, we've identified capacity building techniques that a good leader has. And we've named, I just wrote down to make sure I have them all remembered, five very important techniques for a leader in building the capacity those work with. One of those is communication and listening specifically. The other is questioning, asking questions and listening more than telling and doing. Third is relationships of trust and the importance of trust as a leader. And then accountability. And accountability often gets a bad name, if you will, in terms of disciplining per se. But the way we have shaped that in our professional learning with our principals is just around the importance of, hey, we said that we were going to do this. Where are we at on that? And not just letting things go, being accountable for what you said and what you're going to do. So that's an example I'm just giving out of techniques we've identified or important aspects of leadership we've identified that we've spent some time this year working with principals, both in events, professional learning event, but also coaching and follow-up by their supervisor. And that's going to continue. This is a series that we hope to come back to every couple of years.
And now that you're saying that, Rick, I think it gave me the idea that what really could happen is that some of these action items could really involve a change of culture. For example, an action in professional learning could be some way of gathering new ideas from teachers, or could we quantify the trust that we have as a district with each other? I know our teachers may trust their principals. They often don't trust district leadership. In fact, I remember one time as a community council member saying to Dr. Martin Bates, Martin, you should take the fall on this. Everyone hates you anyway.
That dang district, I blame the district. It's us against
And
the
you know
world.
what? He said, I think you're right. He knew it,
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think some of these, I don't think we need to change the priorities. I was thinking at first, this needs to be a priority. I really think that we could address this in the action items.
I would just point out, I think we do need to make explicitly clear some of those talent development priorities for classified. Some of it is embedded, although implied through professional learning and the expectations of supervisors providing coaching for our employees generally. But to the point, yeah, I think we can make that more explicit for sure.
Kim, did you have anything?
Nothing that has not already been asked, so thanks.
So for my part, just kind of some feedback. As you talked about the Apple, I love that we do allow for that, and that is a great opportunity for a lot of people and how we are doing some talent development. I have heard in the past, and it's not, I'm just going to be honest, it hasn't improved a whole lot. But I have heard that it's very frustrating for people going through that sometimes because the target keeps moving. I've had several people who have gone through the program, and they told me that I had to do this, this, and this, and then I'd be done. And now it's the next year, and they said, oh no, you have to do this and this as well. It would be really nice if we could have that, even if the requirements change, that they could be grandfathered in for what it was originally. Because it's very, very frustrating for them, and they're given, is it 3 years to get the...
Correct.
So in that 3 years, and one of them, she's like, I'm not going to be able to get it because now they added on another 2 classes, and I don't have time to do those now. If I had known about that 2 years ago, I could have done it. So that's just my feedback. It's very frustrating for some of these people who are trying to do that. Anyway. One of the other things, I just want to reiterate this. I know I've said this before, but as far as the PG&E, and I guess I don't know how to as far as the recruitment and retention, I guess teachers would like to know, and I think our public would like to know, and I've asked for this, if there is a correction that they're going through. Can we please have a flow chart or something that's very clear as to this is where you're at, this is the process that you're going through, this is the process that we will go through for you if you are not, if you're not doing that. I get the feedback from teachers that I just am not sure, I don't know, and it's very ambiguous, and that's very frustrating, especially to, our type A organized teachers who are really, we want to have that feedback, and it's valuable feedback. And as well, we want to know that for our principals, just having that, these are the things that we're going to go through corrective action. This is where we're at on that chart. And I guess to me that goes towards the recruitment retention, because if we're trying to retain our teachers want to know, where they stand. So is that fair to say? Anyway. And then the last one is also consistency in PLC. I get a lot of feedback that, and you talk to this, that there is things, but I don't know how we can do this better. If we need to have like a checklist that everybody has that they can, some teachers have said, our administrator is really great. They let us evaluate and they kind of let us do our thing and do what we need, whereas other administrators are very hands-on and in the middle of it. And I don't know if that goes to the training of our administrators in, hey, look, we need to trust our teachers, or what that is, but also having a consistency, at least from my point of view with PLCs. I know some PLCs are much more effective than others. Speaking as a Singleton teacher,
Right.
I know mine are less effective, I think, sometimes.
Yep, secondary's more
And-
challenged.
Yeah, and it is a problem a lot in secondaries. I think our elementary folks have that down a little bit better. But even then, elementary teachers have expressed the frustration that, I have a helicopter principal that feels like they need to be in the middle of everything, whereas our secondary folks are getting very little actual PLC happening. So I don't know if there's some way to, I know that's a really broad thing for a lot of different subjects and a lot of different ways, but that we can have some sort of consistency in that PLC, kind of that, again, not a moving target, but that everybody's accomplishing at least something, I'm just saying that, I guess, as, again, my perspective, I feel like we don't have a target at all. And I don't know how many other PLCs feel that way, and some of them do have a very specific target, maybe too small or too fine, but I don't know, that's just my feedback from PLC.
I know we have a hard stop at 7, but I do think both of those topics could be really good study session agendas, both on our process around correction and then also PLC challenges. I will send, I can send to you or send to the board. We do have a nice conceptual model, and you say target when it comes to PLCs that we've developed, just a bullseye speaking to collaboration, problem solving, and then problem solving student learning by standard that I can forward on. But you're right, both of these are quite hefty topics that perhaps future study sessions we could delve into.
And that would be great. I guess I just question where that happens and what the accountability is with some of, especially our secondary and our Singleton PLCs, because like I say, just knowing where I'm at with that, it is a frustration, and it's something that, as much as you have those teachers that are like, look, we need to have a common assessment, we need to be analyzing data, we need to be doing this. There's other teachers that are like, meh, we don't need to.
Yes.
And it's like,
At first you described want to problem solve student learning by standard, and then the other you described they're farther out on that bullseye, they want to collaborate. Yeah.
and collaboration looks very different depending on which teacher. So anyway, that's my feedback on that. Julie, did you have a comment as well?
Well, I was just going to say that I would appreciate the PLC discussion as well, especially because I think it is, it's a big motivator for the small schools issues that we're dealing with in the PAC committee.
Thank you. Okay, we got 10 minutes, Rick.
Last few slides, again, wanted just to highlight, I made an arrow there, that we see some of this strategic plan at the school level through their continuous improvement plans. Again, not an exact match, but very much aligned and connected in the important aspects of our priorities. They design these continuous improvement plans, and we've worked really hard to, this also oftentimes can become a challenge and can become a thing of doing rather than a way of being. So we make a lot of efforts to make sure we have alignment, make sure our administrators understand the why, and make sure we put thoughtful effort behind them. Just wanted to show an example of a screenshot that comes from their school improvement plans. You'll see the three squares essentially where we've guided their efforts around our three large priorities. Just wanted to speak to our next steps, where we're going next. We've been in a dialogue with GA around review and refinement, received considerable feedback from them, have made adjustments. We're approaching readiness to give a teacher survey out to teachers to get just a global macro feedback from teachers around the strategic plan. And then based on our results there, perhaps make some adjustments both to how we survey and to the version updated to send out to families to receive family feedback. I did want to again plug that our strategic plan is a living, dynamic document. It's something that we talk about monthly and make adjustments to monthly. And so we're having conversations about, well, how do we then have the latest version that's posted? What does that mean? Do we have this back-end document that we're working on and then every summer post the adjustments that were made, knowing that adjustments are continually happening? Or do we have a live document that everyone can go to the link? This is our latest grappling, trying to determine how do we have a living document that still is accessible to everyone. Just wanted to again emphasize our hope is that our strategic plan is a way of being and not a thing of doing. And that's all we have finished before our hearts stop.
Any other?
That was an amazing last statement. Nice work. What a good finish.
Thanks so much, Rick, for all your work on this, and Rich.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, shoot. I had something to say, but I can't remember. So with that, why don't we take a 6-minute recess and come back at 7 o'clock? And at that point in here, and that point we will have to do our vote to go to an executive session.
Should we do that now before we take the break? So we can end the meeting?
Do it now? Okay.
Yeah. I move we adjourn.
We can adjourn if we're going into executive
I
session.
thought that was a separate motion to move to executive session.
No, adjourn means we're done for tonight.
That was sneaky.
Nice try, Clark.
moved.
Nice
So
try.
moved.
That's, and that is a priority vote, so there's been a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Okay, there's
No,
not
but
a
I
second.
will move we go into executive session for the purpose of
Okay, so since-
negotiations and litigation.
The motion to adjourn has been not seconded, so we have a second motion to.
I second Karen's motion.
Okay, to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of negotiations and litigation. And we have a second. We need to have a roll call vote on this. Clark, please
Clark
state your
Nelson,
name.
yes.
Karen Winder, yes.
Chris Nguyen, yes.
Julie Jackson, yes.
Kim Chandler, yes.
Connie Burgess, yes.
Nicole McDermott, yes. All right. We will convene this at 7 o'clock. You now only have 4 minutes to go to the bathroom and get a piece of cake. And get some cookies.